physical wealth. Hello, 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 hello. It is the Adroit Living session of the Erudition Network. Here, I like to volunteer my time to help improve mental health by pointing out adroit living. Sometimes the issues can be, or the topics can be current events and sensitive subjects. So it's, maybe try to watch it to the end. But like, share, subscribe for all the people who are newly here, and for all the people who have already liked, shared, and subscribed. Please know I really appreciate it. But don't forget to ring the bell so you'll know when we're on live. This is a live stream, and I like to have your comments. I want to see you in the comments. So say something to me. We've been having some terrible weather in this May. It's May 19th of 2025, and a lot of tornadoes and inclement weather has really been running rampant through all states in the United States. So be careful, be mindful, and be watchful. But I like to talk about topics that touch the holistic person. So it's not just about your finances, but it's about your mental health and how that equals physical wealth. So a lot of times we're not making that connection of how your mental health impacts you as a whole person. So mind, body, and soul, we're going to dig in. All right. Remember, comment, say something. All right. I get nervous in front of the lights, camera, and action. So you got to overlook me. But listen to the messages. All right. So a lot of people don't understand. When you stick your hand in dirt, you could pull out a fistful of dirt when you pull your hand out. But some people like to claim their hand still clean. What am I talking about? Well, everything in the world samples from schools. So everything that happens in schools it doesn't stay in school. A lot of people, they were like, oh, well, why do we care so much about what's going on in schools? We care because everything is sampling from the school. It's a thing we call in the industrial organization mimetic isomorphism and absorptive capacity. This is what you call in school cheating. Copying off of somebody else's work because you think that kid is the smart one. So you're like, oh, well, you got the answers. Let me copy off you. So everybody sits next to this kid. Yeah, that's what we mean. And you stick your hand in that dirt, and it's like, everybody's going to know that you cheated off of that person because you all have the same answers wrong and the same answers right. Until you got smart enough, to say, I'm not going to copy every one of your answers, but I'm going to copy some of them, just enough to pass. But much like coal miners, when they go into those mines, they know they're gonna get dirty, and it's not just external; it's internal. So it's like you sticking your hand in dirt and pulling out a fistful of dirt, but at the same time, it's deep inside you. Coal miners come out of that coal mine with dirt in their lungs and in they everywhere, and their hair everywhere. So it's hard for somebody to say that these ideas of, oh, you can do this, you can stick your hand in dirt and come out with a clean hand. You can go into a mine and a coal mine and come out healthy. It's not healthy to breathe in all that dirt. And these are the things, that people say, and it messes with people's mental health because it's like, you lying to me. You are lying to me, and I know you lying to me, and it's messing with my mental health. That's why now we're starting to talk more and more about mental health and the impacts that it has. Hi, John. Thank you for coming. If you've seen other shows and you have questions, now would be the time to ask. But I appreciate you for coming. But sometimes we go into that dirt because we know sometimes you're going to pull out a diamond, you're going to pull out some gold, you're going to pull out something worth going into that dirt for. And it's worth going into that dirt to get that coal, because those are rare, precious jewels that's needed to make modifications in diverse purposes. So we're always going into these things because of that. And a lot of people, they think that you're doing it for a different purpose. So they using it to get rich. And they're telling you these wild things that's messing with your mental health, because they think that that's what's motivating you. That's what's incentivizing you. In the industrial workforce, we call that motivation theory. We call it incentive theory. But a lot of times we don't have it in the studies that there's something else in there. That's an underlying thing that's happening that we're not writing about in our studies. We're not finding ways to figure out how we can understand that, so that we can provide motivation or incentives that would actually cater people to be more productive in those areas the way we want to. But instead, they just try to do things to control you. For example, it's like a needle in a haystack. And I don't know if you've ever seen a haystack before, but sometimes them needles can be really sharp, and it may feel like it's a needle, an actual needle. And then you go and you get a new job, and you are now working to find needles in haystacks, and you're learning from your supervisor or the person who came before you. You're trying to learn how to sort out the needles from the hay. And so you're going through it, and you find something that looks like a needle, and you ask your manager, you're like, well, this looks like a needle. And they convince you, nope, that's not a needle. You didn't find a needle, but keep on looking. That's pretty close. And then the more of these that you find, you're like, man, I think I found a lot of needles, but they always tell me that it's not. It's that same gaslighting that people are doing. And it's like, it started somewhere. It started in school, because when you were in school, you were conditioned to trust your authority figures. And that sort of mentality continued onward in your job. And now you're focused. And it's like all the people who came before you are showing you, you know, it's me, and insisting on me following their methodology. So it's not the manager saying this is the way that the job is done. And you're kind of understanding that because you saw it in school already. And then you're like, well, I'm trying to follow your methodology, but you're telling me that this is not a needle, and I believe it is a needle. So they say, I must remain focused. That's what they tell you. You got to remain focused, because it's difficult work. It's hard for you to know what you're doing. So they tell you what it is you're doing, and then they tell you whether it's right or whether it's wrong, despite your innate ability to discern, I think this really is it. And that's messing with people's mental health, but they don't really care about that. They keep on doing it because they're trying to solidify their job. They're not trying to help you with your job like a manager is supposed to. And it's like you keep going through the motions all the time, and you're very focused at the job. Then you start to say, well, I think I need to do something, outside of the job that helps to keep my mind off of, all the problems that I'm having at work. So then you go and you find yourself a hobby, and you find yourself gravitating towards these things called magnets. And somehow you find yourself playing with magnets, because you're like, God, if I keep dwelling on these people at this job, I'm just going to go postal and it's going to be over. I don't care what happens. It's just going to be what it's going to be. And then you find yourself playing more and more with these magnets. And you're like, I don't even understand why I'm playing with these magnets. But you go back to your work at the job, and you start playing around with the haystacks and trying to find the needles. And you keep getting more and more frustrated because your authority figure is telling you you're not finding needles. And you're like, I thought that was a needle this time. I really thought it. And then they tell you, well, You're still not performing at your job the way you need to. You're still not performing at your schoolwork the way you need to. Uh-oh, it seems like we're having some issues showing comments on Facebook. So please, if you're trying to show some comments, if you're trying to comment, please go to YouTube. Look me up, Tina Phillips, Adroit Living, ADROIT. Think of it as the acronym for a doctor of it. A doctor of what? Living. ADROIT. I'm just saying so you'll know how to spell adroit, because I'm telling you, adroit is a small word, look like it's easy to spell, but it's not really easy. But it means clever and skilled with your hands. And we all do that. Just like in this, haystack story, where you go to work and you thinking, who has the job of going in the haystack pulling out needles? Think about it as it relates to your job in your school when you're going to school and you're doing these things. And those are authority figures are telling you some really crazy stuff, and it's messing with you mentally. And you try to distract yourself with something else. And you're wondering, why am I doing this? And then they tell you, stay focused on what you're supposed to be doing. Stay focused on your goals and objectives. And it's like, this is my free time. I can do what I want with my free time. So they even trying to control what you do in your free time. But sometimes when we pray, we don't even notice that we're praying. And it's like God leading us somewhere. We're like, man, why am I playing with magnets? Then one day you go and you play with some even stronger magnets. And you're like, wow, these magnets really do a lot of stuff. They're really cool, but you haven't really put two and two together yet, because somebody told you that 11 is called 1E1. Yeah, let that sink in. But I'm just saying, it's just that's that same gaslighting that people do when they're telling you, oh well, that haystack needle that you found is not an actual needle, it's hay. So then they keep on doing that to you, and you finally understand as on your last you on your last straw, like literally in the haystack. You on your last straw. And you like, now there's gotta be some needles in this haystack, because we know there's needles in this haystack, and this is the last straw. And you telling me this is not a needle? Now you about to go straight postal, because they're like, nope, it's not a needle. Go to the next haystack and try again. Meanwhile, their productivity is up as a manager and a supervisor because they've coveted your work. And it's unbeknownst to you because you trust the authority figure. And now you're mentally really frustrated and about to just go postal. But because they didn't know that you have now developed this unique obsession with magnets, because you were trying to distract yourself from the problems you were having at the job, you got a really strong magnet in your pocket. So when they send you to the next haystack, suddenly all the needles that was in the haystack start to attract that magnetic pull, and they all come at the magnet that's on your person. Now you find all the magnets that's in your pocket being strong enough to pull all the needles in the haystack. You didn't put two and two together, but now you have all these needles right there in your pocket, and it's like a bunch of needles. You look like a porcupine with a bunch of needles sticking to your pockets because you got these big old magnets filling your pocket. And everybody's looking like, man, your productivity level shot up. How did you do it? How did you do it? How is it that now I can't even convince you that that's not a needle and that's a hay needle as opposed to a metal needle? How can I convince you that when I didn't condition you or train you to understand this? I did everything in my power to hinder you from being able to perform accordingly, according to expectations. So, how did you know that all of these are needles? Well, a lot of time from your unique oppression comes these discoveries, things that you didn't aim to find. It all comes out. And now Everybody's looking at you because you have now not only found all the needles in your haystack in record time, but you've developed a new methodology for having to find more needles in the haystack. So now everybody's mad at you because you stumbled upon something so big nobody else thought about before you did it. And now it's needles in this haystack that nobody even thought. And the other haystacks that everybody thought was clean, you pulling out needles out of that haystack too. And everybody's mad. They're like, how did this newbie come up in here telling us how to do our job? Now all these magnets, they're going to take our job because now we're obsolete and they don't need us anymore. Now their mental health is disturbed because you're innocent, just trying to do your job, trying to keep your sanity, trying to meet goals and expectations. You've stumbled across some things they would rather have kept hidden. They would have rather have kept it hidden that you were the one that was discovering those needles in the first place. And because they didn't do their job, there was some more needles in the haystack, even though they coveted your work. And it's like people are so ugly inside that it's like, wow, what happened? They tried to convince you that you were far left and discourage you and tell you, oh no, you're not doing your job right. And they give you bad evals, bad work evaluations, and they say things that's really discouraging and tell you how you're not fit for the job. They tell you how you're performing terribly, or they'll give you a bad grade if it's school, and they'll give you a bad grade because they're like, well, you didn't do it the way I told you to do it, even though you have the right answer. So even though you have the right answer about how to get the needles and find real true needles, they mad at you because you didn't follow their methodology. And it's like, your methodology suck. So there's that. And then you're like, you didn't say it, but it's kind of out there for the matter of the fact that how the productivity level increased once you were oppressed. It happens like that across the board. It all depends on who you're oppressing when this thing comes out. A lot of people go through these same problems. There was jobs of, finding needles in haystacks many centuries ago. And it was a job until somebody came along with the idea to improve the methodology, to have the performance to be accelerated so people can do something more impactful. But a lot of people don't like change. So a lot of improvements that were also changed in the methodology and the way that everybody did their processes or the steps that they took in order to make things happen. A lot of people was like, nope, we're not going to do that because they want to fight against the learning curve, because everything has a learning curve, and they're like, they doubt in themselves that they can do these things. So they're like, nope, they're going to buck against change, buck against improvements, even though it has its perks. And they say things like, oh, you're going to take our jobs from us now. And it's not about taking your job from you as much as it is about finding new ways to, or better ways to be productive, to be useful. But people don't see it that way. And that's a lot of reason why they will covet your work and say things like, oh, you think you so smart. Oh, you think you clever. Oh, you a smart one, huh? And then they'll tell you, yeah, they'll make excuses trying to make it seem like you're stupid when you're not, because they do not want the kind of improvements that your work productivity has encouraged, has incentivized, has motivated. It's not the matter of the fact that your skills and your knowledge and your ability is insufficient, but the matter of the fact is they don't want to implement those improvements and give you the credit for it because they've been there all that time doing the same thing every day, day in and day out, and coveting people's work and falsely reporting their work evaluations, trying to get them to be overwhelmed with their work so they'll work harder and not complain and their voice won't be heard because, well, you had a bad eval and now you're just a disgruntled employee, or you received a bad grade in school, so you're just a disgruntled student who doesn't meet the mark. It's centuries old problems. And it's like when you became the one that was oppressed, even though these were century old techniques, when you became the one that was oppressed, it became a unique oppression. And you, because you might not even realize that you prayed, but you was like, God, if you say one more thing to me, I'm gonna choke you out. And you didn't even realize that was deep down in you until that person told you what pushed you to the edge to make you feel like that. Even if you would never do that, people push you to the edge, and you like, if I go out, we both going. And it's like that's a strong indication that your mental health is getting weaker. And whatever the objective is that's standing in the way of your mental health, you're trying to get rid of it, whether you're fully cognitive of it or you realize it in hindsight once you've actually made the moves to eliminate your problem. A lot of times people can't control their behavior when somebody is constantly pushing them, gaslighting them, lying to their face, and then taking their work as if as if that person doesn't understand what you just did. And it's like, I know what you just did, and it's able to be tracked what you just did, but I'm the one that's going to suffer the consequences for it. Nope, not in a digital world, we not. But I'm just saying, how am I saying it's centuries old of a issue? Well, we saw with David and Goliath how David was a really weak guy, and the warriors were laughing at David because he had to fight Goliath, but he was so malnourished. He over there eating, vegan style, no meat, no protein, doesn't get his weight up. So he just a thin little dude, and he's got to fight this big old giant called Goliath, who towers over all normal size average men, or even the abnormally large men. And you got to fight this dude. You scrawny. You got pipe cleaner for arms, and you can't even hold a sword or a shield. What you gonna do with against this big old giant? Everybody's making fun of him. But it was the matter of that unique oppression and having to meet the goal that he had to accomplish that made the methodology change, because they were like, we use swords, shields, and armor in order to go to battle. He couldn't do any of that. He couldn't do any of that. And they were making fun of him. And he was like, I'm at my last straw. I'm at my wit's end. I'm going to do this thing the way I know how to do things. And what did he do? He switched up the whole methodology and the way that people go into battle. He took a rock and a slingshot and slayed Goliath. Now the methodology of how people fight in battle changed because they no longer had that barbaric methodology. They had a more strategic methodology. So you see, unique oppression, it does change things. It makes it better. It improves things. So change is not necessarily the objective, more so than meeting the goals of expectation. It's not about the processes in which you used to obtain the goals, or the titles and labels that you put on things. Just because you're accustomed to putting on whole armors and helmets and shields and shin covers and elbow covers and all this sort of thing, that this scrawny guy is never going to be able to put on. And this battle that he has to fight, he don't have time to go eat some meat and get protein and build up some fat and muscle so he can be able to put on all that gear and fight this dude. But he still had this objective that he had to accomplish the goal. A lot of times we're not seeing how the unique oppressions are actually the devices that push these improvements that span the globe in advancements, in advanced ways. Some people are too busy trying to show a clear line of distinction between things they claim are totally different, as opposed to trying to say, yep, we've been doing it this way for years, but maybe there's a better way. They don't want to do that because they feel like they'll be obsolete. They will no longer be useful, and they overlook the rate of failure. They overlook the fact that it's not making as much money as it could if we were to try to improve upon the methodology. But centuries old stories, whether you feel like it's mythology or if it's actually real, it's the matter of the outcomes that help people to understand what happened and why this is the way it is. A lot of times the stories, they elude people. That it goes right over their head. They'll read the same story. For example, I don't know if anybody's ever told you the David and Goliath story the way I just did. How about it doesn't matter? How about we just focus on the message and then we come to understand why it's applicable in our current events and how that application should be applied and in different ways so that it caters to the objectives that everybody has in these current events. And stop trying to act like these things don't have a positive, strong correlation in a scientific manner so that we can implement these things on a broader scale. Instead, we're just trying to, well, that didn't mean nothing. Don't look behind the curtain. And we have all this satire in these movies that show us, well, we know. We know, but we don't want you to know. We don't want you to have that verification and that validation until we can find a way to control how you're going to be able to profit and benefit and gain from these things. But you didn't know that. You didn't know that that's why the unique oppression exists. You didn't realize that because they put labels on things and categorize them in such a way that keeps you distracted from the main objective. For example, gaslighting. That's been a term that has changed over time, but it's the methodology that has not ever changed. It's remained the same. And that's why I told you about the David and Goliath story. That's why I told you about the needle in the haystack and the fistful of mud. Because how do you define insanity? Needles and mud. That's why I told you the way I did, because a lot of times, how about this? Well, first I'll finish that statement. A lot of times people are distracted and they don't know when to trust what someone is saying. And we're seeing that a lot in current events where people are angry because they trusted somebody and they thought they weren't going to be preyed upon because they looked like the oppressor, but then they were uniquely oppressed anyway. So the reason why I said that this is a centuries old situation is because they say a lot of people not going to read anyway, so they won't even know. They won't have any idea. So they'll be interpreted what's in the scripts, what's in the books, what's in these lessons for people to understand. And they'll never go out and study to show themselves approved so that they're like unaware. And then it's like when they go and they read it for themselves and they don't come with the same conclusion that the person who's interpreting the information is getting, they try to gaslight them again. But that gaslighting was not like titled the way it is now. And the titles the evolution of the titles are showing a sign of the times of the level of of people's tolerance, the fed up level. Everybody's on this fool around, find out type of situation. But that's because we're we've seen the methodology of coveting, lying to your face and telling you, oh, it would never happen to you. I would never hurt you, but then they hurt you. It's a level of that, even though it's like, oh, it seems like it's new because it just happened. I just met you. How can I already be fed up? That's because there's this thing that we don't really talk about often because we're always trying to find out how can something that's not physically tangible also be physically tangible. So the spirit in which all of these things are moving in, it's built up this heaviness. So even though you're just born into this, you born fed up. So when somebody lying to you, it's less likely that you're going to be able to tolerate these lies, and you'll tell them right to their face, you lying to me. No, it was a fallacy. No, it was just gaslighting. What you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And then you're like, I'm not taking it anymore. Even though you may have just had the experience and it was a new experience for you, you still may be like, yeah, I can't take it. And that's why it's a sign of the time. The labels on the mythology evolving shows how the level of tolerance is wearing out. So gaslighting, and everybody's saying it so frequently, but it's a strong correlation to mental health and the decrease and the decline in mental health. And it's a strong correlation of mental health to actual financial gains and wealth and prosperity and productivity levels. But a lot of people are like, well, we can't control it. So we're studying it, but we still can't control it because they're busy trying to tell you, well, this is the way it should be because it's my turn, because I've been here the longest and you just got here and now your productivity levels are way higher than mine because that same methodology of oppression that I endured until I got this tenure, now I'm trying to put on you, but it's not working out that way because you come into the scene and you get fed up and suddenly you change the whole methodology of everything, and now you skipping over me in the hierarchy, and now you get promoted over me, and I've been here waiting for my turn. That's why. And then it's like they also do it to incentivize you because now they want you to continue to advance them. So they throw you a bone and let you advance just a little bit, hoping that you'll be able to, keep advancing them. I know a lot of times I talk fast, but this is recorded. So you can go back and rewatch the recording. So I don't need to, keep repeating it. And you don't even need to feel necessity to tell somebody how many times you had to watch it in order to get that same understanding. But I break these things down to a point where anybody, regardless of your mental ability and your encoding process, you can understand what I'm saying. And this is how you can understand and relate everything that you're going through in your job, in school. You can understand what's happening now so you can improve your mental health. So share this with somebody that has a job. Share this with some students who you don't know is encountering these unique oppressions. I'm telling you, it's unique oppression because at some point, somebody is going to pray, and because they don't want to hurt nobody. They gonna say, God, if you just say one more thing to me one more time. Oh, God, if you put my name in your mouth one more time. It's that part. You don't even have to believe in God for you to say it. I have a lot of friends who are atheists, and I find it funny because they'll even say something like, God, when they get scared, oh my God, or something like that. And I'm like, you atheist. And they'll be like, why you gotta bring that up? I'm just confused. That's all. I'm trying to understand. And they get it, so they're not mad when I bring it up. But I'm like, a lot of times people, they think, you you talk too fast, so they didn't understand what you said. I'm gonna slow it down for you. I'm gonna slow it down for you, but I'm gonna write it in academia and in books in a way that for those people who can pick it up faster, they can have access to it so that they can get it a little bit faster. And some episodes I'm gonna have to just go straight shoot you, and shoot the truth out there, and you're gonna have to rewind as many times as you need to. That's why I put the challenge out to rewatch that episode at least 3 times so you can get an understanding of what I'm saying. A lot of times people, they try to think ahead of you and think about what you're going to say, so they don't listen to what you're saying. So the methodology, even in listening, is different than what a lot of people acknowledge fully, so that they don't understand things. But somebody who's on the spectrum, because they've embraced the fact that they're on the spectrum, they listening extra hard. They know their weakness. They know that they got to focus hard. They know they got to repeat the lesson in order to understand. So they might even pick it up faster than somebody who has let's say a PhD, because a lot of times, for example, we saw in the Bible how Jesus went, and it's not just in the Bible, but in the Bible, how Jesus went to do what he wanted to do to show everybody the way. And he didn't put labels or anything on it, but he also went to the synagogues and he told the people, this is the way. And a lot of the people were like, well, we don't want to listen to you because we already have the answers. So Jesus switched it up. He was like, all right, if y'all got the answer, then I'm gonna go out here where people know they don't know the way. You understand that? I know it's probably not been taught to you that way, but that's one of the messages that you can take away from that behavior. He went to tell people this is the way, and the people who swore they were really intelligent, they didn't listen. So the people who they felt, the people in the synagogues, the clergymen, the intelligent people, they felt that the people who were beneath them, those people outside of the synagogues and the churches, they were beneath them, but they were more intelligent than them because they were listening, whereas the other people who thought they was too smart were not listening. For example, there was a story in the Bible where Jesus was talking to some people, a group of people, and they was like, well, Jesus, you sure do talk pretty, but we don't understand none of them parables you using. And Jesus looked at them and he said a comment to God, and him and God left. I don't know if you read the Bible, but you might want to look for it. And then Jesus started talking to them in a way that they can understand. He broke it down and slowed it down a lot. He talked to them as fishermen and told them, well, when God is working with you, he casts a net far and wide, just like you fishermen do, in order to catch fish so that you can feed your families and your community. Well, what God does is he casts the net far and wide so that anybody and everybody know the way, regardless of the methodology and the location that you're in. Then he told the people who were farmers, he said, well, y'all plant seeds all the time, so you know about seeds. Well, God plants seeds. He throws the seeds out there and he lets the wind take it, and it goes where it may. And sometimes when it falls on concrete, it doesn't grow the way it should. Birds and things of that nature will come around and get it, or the wind will take it and it'll roll over somewhere where it can be rooted and it can grow. Well, that goes to show that sometimes if you miss your blessing, it'll sprout somewhere else, and it'll be somebody else's blessing, or it'll feed somebody else. It'll feed the birds that's out there hungry. And then there's also the lesson that it's like you don't know it, but sometimes sinkholes happen. Yeah, there's that part. God put a seed there and the ground can't accept it, and then the sinkhole happened. Guess what? The ground really wanted that seed. That's all I'm saying. And then it's just like some people would say, well, you'll be surprised. You speak to a mountain, that mountain get up and move. You'll be surprised. A lot of times when we're reading these stories in these ancient books and ancient scribes, we're not taking the messages that we need to take from it. And we're thinking that it's above our heads. We're thinking that only the elite know and most intelligent can understand these things. And that's not true, because a lot of times they fancying it up and their interpretation is really insufficient. It's really missing the whole points of matters. And it's not just, that it's not just that, because there's many points you can derive from these stories, but it's the matter of the fact that a lot of times when you read those books, it's written for the people who can't understand. For example, when Jesus was talking to those people who said, "Oh, you sure do got pretty words. You sure talk pretty, but we can't understand you. We gonna follow you because you talk pretty." It's like Jesus was like, "Write this down so everybody's gonna understand." And it's repetitive. That book is so repetitive. It's extremely large book, but it's extremely repetitive because there's nothing new under the sun. Just because you can't relate it and you can't make the links to the current events doesn't mean it's not relative. Just like we're doing today, and our mental health is to the point where we have to start making these connections, because it's no possible way there's not an answer for what I'm going through. And you're searching for the answer and you're getting fed up, and you're getting to the point where you're going to act outside of your normal character because your mind can't take it anymore. And because it's still your body and you reacting, it's your body, it's your actions, you will endure the consequences of your behavior, even though you could not control what you did because your mental health broke. And a lot of people watch the previous episodes I did. I told you there's studies out there where people are saying, yeah, we know this is happening and we're warning people. And it's people that look like them who are telling them. That's why when God sends out a messenger, he doesn't send just a messenger that looks one particular way. They look like everything. They look like everything and everybody, because they know they're not going to listen to anybody, just any old body. That's why it's even written that out of the mouths of babes, they'll teach. And it's like, why was that written? Why was it that way? It's to say the people least expected will be the same one as leading you, guiding you, and educating you, even though you've been doing this for such a long time, but you still haven't got it. And it's like, whatever happened to those people in the Bible that God had to talk to for such a long, long time? Were they really that stupid that they just didn't get the understanding, even though he spoke to them in a way that they could understand? He slowed it down for them. He used it examples that they know and they expertise in. And it's like they still didn't know. Yeah, it's people out there that's like that. How do you know? Because we have seen a lot of people in these current events who have believed that, oh, because I look like you won't oppress me the way you oppress diverse cultures. Okay, but now they've lost their federal jobs. They lost their jobs in the schools. They lost their jobs in the board of education. They've lost their jobs everywhere. And they're like, why are you oppressing me when you told me you weren't going to treat me that way? Well, you isolated yourself from your allies because they didn't look like you. You knew they were oppressed in the same manner in which you were afraid you would also be oppressed, even though you look like the people who are oppressing. And stop trying to act like all these black people and minorities are not speaking up just because you don't want to listen to them. And it's a whole lot of white people who are saying the same thing, and they're not following the few people who like to oppress and prey upon people as though they have no way of being reached. It's a lot of white people out here who are saying, oh, we don't need to be oppressing people. We need everybody to unite because we're Americans, or because we belong to the same country, and we need this country to prosper. We need this country to avail much. But a lot of people are like, well, that few is spoiling the bunch, so we're going to follow the spoiled. But you're failing to see that There's more profit and gain in doing things the right way, as opposed to appeasing the few who would rather be a predator and prey on you when you least expect it. And you think your mental health is going to hold up when you say, I trusted you and this is how you did? You don't know how you're going to react, but you're starting to say things in TikToks and things like, where's all the black people that should be saying something and helping us? Y'all know what it's like to be oppressed. Why aren't you saying something? You know what it's like to lose your pension just short of gaining the 20 years needed in order to claim your pension, your retirement. Yeah, we do know. But just like you sat there, didn't say anything, what can we say now? We can't say anything because you've already silenced our voice. So we're not in the same area anymore in order to be heard. We don't have the same platform in order to be seen and heard. So now when you're sitting there wondering who you're going to turn to, you got to turn to the same one we did when we got fed up. You're going to have to pray. I know. You don't believe in God. You don't want to believe in God. You don't want to believe there's such a thing as hell in heaven, but you live in a bit of a hell on earth with that kind of attitude. Meanwhile, you trying to understand, how can these black people and minorities be so oppressed, but they having fun at cookouts? They sleeping at night. They getting a lot of sleep. They actually getting restful, rejuvenating sleep. Whereas you're not having fun at all, but you have the money, you had all the cards in your hands before they ran out of people to prey on and started preying upon you. I know I did a show where I showed some teddy bears most recently and a colorful owl. That was relative to current events in such a way that is elementary. I try very hard to break things down and be really sensitive to the topics because people are emotional, and I'm trying hard to help people with their mental health because it's important. There's things that's coming up and you may not be fully aware of it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to change the facts of the matter. A lot of people don't believe in souls. Well, there was a study that people did, scientists did. They conducted a study where they had some people who were about to die, and they had them on this scale so that when they die, they can weigh them of what happened when they transitioned, whether it was, well, they whatever happened when they took their last breath, whether you call it transition or whatever, when they transition from death to life, from life to death. So when they knew that the persons was a really good person and they were on the scale, and then they knew that the other person was really bad and did some really questionable things in their life that really hurt people. So they put all these people on the scale and they weighed them. So when they took their last breath, they weighed the people who were really known to be good, and their weight decreased when they passed and took their last breath, whereas they weighed the people who were known to be bad, and their weight increased as if something weighed them down. And it's like, when you go to hell, does your soul get dragged down so to the point where it's like now you heavy, and you, even though we understand that your soul leaves your body, and when you go to heaven, your soul leaves your body even then, but it's lighter. Nobody asked this question before, but that study, in my opinion, it showed a couple of things. First, they concluded souls must not only exist, but there must also be a heaven and hell. And that means the soul. And then it's like, also, a lot of people say, well, the rapture hasn't taken place. A lot of people who believe in that, they say the rapture hasn't taken place. So whoever dies and they're good, they sleep, they rest. And And, I don't know how, people just go straight to hell when you die, but that was always the case. Um, so it's like when people would have near death experiences, they would always tell the testimony that they saw heaven and what heaven was like, or people who had a near death experience, they would say they saw hell and what hell was like. And that's why you got that Christmas story of Scrooge, right? But we still have this thought that souls don't exist and the rapture hasn't taken place. So anybody who's sleeping in Christ, they rest when they die and they wait for the rapture. So that study really kind of proved that we're over that time. That time is done. When you take your last breath, you going either to heaven or hell. But have you ever thought about maybe the reason why a lot of times we're experiencing these really strong emotions is because you're sitting there thinking one way and you're being distracted from the real objective. You're trying to prove whether heaven or hell exists and whether souls go to heaven or hell. I see the comment, huh? So I'm going to break it down a little bit better. You're trying to prove the study was only to prove whether souls go to heaven or hell once they take their last breath. But when you look at it a little deeper, you can see that souls, when a good person, the body gets lighter, and when it's a bad person, the body gets heavier. What if, for any possible reason, what if the remnants of that is being left behind? So when you have all these bad people and they're dying, the remnants is weighing the body down, and that evil is kind of lingering and being like released in the air like a gas. For example, a lot of people, they say your body decomposes and it returns back to the earth, right? Well, what if you have a body and it's like, oh, well, that was a really bad person, and now you have released all that back into the earth? The same way may be happening with the people who go to heaven. That goodness is now spreading back into the earth, but we're combative of the two. I don't know. That's just a thought that goes along with that line of thinking. But when we conduct studies, we're mainly focused on the one goal of seeing what happens. And there's so much more detail that's happening there that we're ignoring. That's my point. We're ignoring the other parts and aspects that is answering age-old questions. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what it seems like to me. So what some fail to recognize with such studies is, and the testimonials, is that you're actually giving the testimony of the lived experiences that's actually happening and factual. And that's what we should be studying instead of diverting our attention and being distracted because, oh, well, we weren't looking for that. That's not the answer we was looking for. That's not the methodology we want to go and implement because, well, we've been here a long time and we want to keep going down this path and ignoring any advancements that this new methodology would provide for us with this new train of thinking, this new way of doing things, this new way of being advanced to get the outcome that we're looking for. So we're just going to ignore everything because, well, it's not the way we thought of it. It's not what we wanted, even though it's the outcome you were looking for. But I'm just saying, what will you do when it's your chance? Will you say, well, because that's not the way we normally do things, we're not gonna go that route. And you're gonna continue to wait your turn in line, and then somebody come along that's a newbie. They're not scared. They're not afraid to challenge and bring about this methodology that their unique oppression has brought out and inspired. And now you risked the chance of getting your just dues because you allowed yourself to be oppressed. So you can go to methodology in which everybody has been going all that time. So now when this new person come along and everybody likes that person, they'll take that new person and their methodology because it's more productive. Well, what about yours? Yours was more productive. Yours was advancing things, but you allowed yourself to be stifled and shushed and shunned. And now you're like, it's my turn. And you said it's my turn. And now I don't get to have my turn because somebody else came along and they're showing this advancement. Well, what about when I showed it? What about when I pointed out to you that this is the way we can do things better and faster and be more productive and advance financially and faster and all that sort of thing? But you gonna take this person when it's my turn and you put them over me, and now I get pushed down the ranks in the hierarchy, so I gotta wait for my turn again. That's why you have people who are mentally snapping because they saw those processes and they did what they were told, and they walked the walk and talked the talk, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter. And now they're at wit's end because they put so much time, they dedicated so much time and effort, and you can't get any of that back. And now a lot of people are like, well, we just can't take it anymore. And that kind of spirit, that kind of vibe is radiated in the air and it's resting, even though a lot of people who had those oppressions, they're long dead and gone, but that heaviness is still here. And we breathing it in, we taking it in, and we're like, look, we can't take it anymore, even though we just started feeling this oppression. We can't take it anymore. What about that are we not really understanding? Maybe it's because we never thought of it that way before. But now that you're thinking about it that way, because I'm telling you that that's probably a, a, a method of why we got here so fast and how this happened, because it's not new. It's not news. You've seen people get taken away from their jobs before and they lost their ability to get a pension and retirement. You've seen it happen before. We've seen a recession. We've seen a depression. We've seen it all before. But why is it now that we're to the point where we are extremely fed up and we refuse to take any more? Because we have defined the definition of insanity. They say, well, when you do the same thing and you expect different results, that's the definition of insanity. Meanwhile, that's exactly what they're trying to condition in routine and tell people this is the way you do these things. This is how you're supposed to do this. Don't change up the methodology. Do it this way. And you're like, well, we kept doing it that way, but it didn't render the results that we want and need and desire. And we need it now. So it's no longer about what we want and what we desire to have. We need it for our mental health. And it's like, you missing the point yet again. You put your faith and trust in people. And that's what it was. That was the routine thing that you were doing all the time and expecting different results when you routinely saw they're going to fail you. But you have routinely also seen that when you put your faith in God, even if you had just a tiny little bit of a mustard seed of faith that's barely able to be seen and blow away in the wind, because it's just a tiny little seed that you throwing on barren land, you throwing on fertile ground, you throwing in the wind or wherever it's going, just because it exists, you have it. And that little bit of faith in God, that same little bit is not growing. It's not doing anything. It's just that same little amount, but it's rendering different results all the time. Because it has been said so many times in so many ways, you can't put your faith in people, regardless of whether they look like you or not. Regardless of if they tell you they're not going to pray upon you or not, regardless of if they tell you they love you and their family and blood or not, you can't put your faith in that. You have to start to trust, even with this, just that little mustard seed of faith. That's all it takes. you start to advance, excel. And sometimes you don't use it. You don't pull it out all the time. You only pull it out when you fed up, like completely fed up, can't take no more, and you about to snap. But that's all you need. That's all you needed was that little bit of faith. But it took all that in order for you to whip it out and use it and implement it. And that's when you advanced beyond your unique oppression and develop methodologies which nobody has ever seen, and you pulling needles out of haystacks that nobody ever thought would be uncovered. What was hidden is now known. And now it's improving mental health across the board. That's been my time for today. I hope I explained that well enough. If not, don't worry. I got an idea. I'm going to implement that. So keep watching. Ring the bell. I'm going to start writing it and doing things in ways that everybody can understand. Even if you're not looking at this mug, tell it to you. I'm just saying, I have an idea. I'm be able to reach you. I'm going to do my best to reach you, because mental health is physical wealth. See you next episode. Mental health is physical wealth.